settle yourself down and let your thoughts drift like the slow current of the Nile. This is not a hurried tale. It is a quiet wandering through time across the sands and fertile fields of ancient Egypt. We are often told of Egypt through its monuments, the towering pyramids, the golden treasures, the solemn stone faces of pharaohs gazing into eternity. Yet, beyond these marvels, life unfolded in the villages, in the fields, and in the humble homes where ordinary people drew breath, labored, and hoped for the rising of the next day's sun. Tonight, we will walk with them. We will follow their rhythm, their toil, their prayers, and their dreams. We will drift from the farmer's furrow to the pharaoh's throne, from the mysteries hidden in tombs to the perfumed halls of priests and nobles. And we will do it slowly, gently, letting history soothe us rather than startle us. So close your eyes, if you wish. Imagine the warm desert air moving softly against your face, carrying with it the faint scent of river reeds and damp earth. Imagine the horizon glowing faintly with the eternal sun, casting its calm upon the land. We begin, as all Egyptians did, with the Nile. Imagine yourself now not as a king, not as a builder of monuments, but as a simple farmer living in a modest mud brick house in Deir el-Medina, a village of workers and artisans tucked near the Valley of the Kings. Your life is tied to the rhythm of the river. Without the Nile, there is no life. With its annual flood, the land is reborn, and with its retreat, fertile soil is left behind. The days begin early. The sun rises with a pale gold light, and you stir from a mat woven of reeds. The walls of your home are rough, built of clay baked hard under the Egyptian sun. Inside, it is cool at dawn, though by noon the heat will press down heavily and the air will shimmer. Step outside, and you will see your neighbors already moving. Men walk toward the fields with wooden plows and baskets slung across their backs. Women balance jars of water upon their heads, graceful in their stride. Children scamper barefoot across the dusty lanes, chasing each other before being pulled into chores. Your field waits for you, though it is not truly yours. The state, the pharaoh and his officials, claims the land. You tend it, but you must also give a portion of what you grow as tax. Scribes, dressed in plain linen, yet carrying authority in their ink-stained fingers, will one day come to measure the grain. What remains after their counting is what you and your family will live on. In the field, the work is steady, repetitive, and endless. The wooden plow is pulled by oxen, its points scratching lines into the soil. The earth is dark and rich, thick with the memory of the river's gift. Seeds are scattered by hand, a rhythmic motion, one that you could do with your eyes closed. Then, you move along the irrigation channels, shallow ditches carved by generations, letting water flow gently across the ground. The sound of it is soft, almost like a lullaby, a trickle, a murmur, the lifeblood of the village. The sun climbs, and sweat gathers on your skin. The cotton-like linen tunic clings as you bend and straighten, bend and straighten. Insects hum lazily around you. The smell of damp soil rises, mingling with the faint sweetness of ripening crops. Life is simple, but never easy. If the flood of the Nile is generous, the harvest will be plentiful, and you may have enough to feed your household through the long year. If the river fails, if its waters are too low or too wild, then hunger looms. Families learn to live between hope and worry, always dependent on something greater than themselves. As midday arrives, you pause. Under a small cluster of palm trees, you rest and eat your meal, Coarse bread made from emmer wheat, perhaps a few dried figs, maybe some onions, sharp in flavor, but filling. If fortune smiles, there might be fish caught from the Nile, roasted and shared. Water is drunk from clay jars, cool and earthy on the tongue. In these quiet pauses, you hear the sounds of your world. A donkey brays somewhere down the road. A woman sings softly as she grinds grain on a stone quern, the rhythm of her voice matching the rhythm of her arms. The breeze carries the cries of ibis and cranes rising from the riverbanks. It is a life full of repetition, but repetition carries its own comfort. The rhythm of their lives becomes the rhythm of the land itself. When the sun lowers and shadows stretch across the fields, you make your way home. The air cools, and with it, a sense of relief settles over the village. Smoke curls up from clay ovens where evening meals are cooked. The scent of roasted barley drifts across the lanes. Inside your small home, light comes not from electricity but from oil lamps, their flames flickering softly, casting dancing shadows against the clay walls. Children curl up on mats, their chatter slowly giving way to drowsy silence. You, too, settle down, weary but accustomed to the cycle. It is not an easy life. Taxes weigh heavily. Hunger is a constant fear, and the pharaoh's reach extends even here, into your fields and your storehouse. And yet, there is a quiet dignity to it. You belong to the Nile, and the Nile belongs to you. Together, you survive. And so, the days pass, one much like the next, until seasons change, and the flood returns, and the cycle begins anew. Now, let us leave the fields behind for a while. The humble farmer, bent over the soil, lived under the shadow of rulers whose names were carved in stone. And among these rulers, few were as strange, as bold, or as fleeting as Pharaoh Akhenaten. Close your eyes and imagine the shifting sands of the 14th century BCE. Egypt was at the height of its power. Temples were vast, gods were many, and priests held influence as great as kings. The pantheon was crowded. Ammonius, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Hathor, and countless others filled every temple wall and every prayer whispered by common folk. But then a new voice rose. It was Akhenaten, born Amenhotep IV, a prince of the royal line. At first, he followed the traditions, bowing to Ammonius, the great hidden god. Yet, something stirred within him, or perhaps within his court, or his priests, or his restless thoughts. Slowly, then suddenly, he turned away from the gods of his ancestors and fixed his devotion upon one alone, Aten, the sun disk. Aten was not hidden in shadowy sanctuaries. Aten was visible to all, a glowing orb that stretched its rays across the land. Akhenaten proclaimed that Aten was not merely a god among gods, but the only God, supreme and singular. Imagine, if you will, the shock this caused. In a world where thousands of years had built temples to many, Akhenaten stripped them away with a single voice. In his 5th year as pharaoh, he did something astonishing. He left Thebes, the city of temples, and founded a brand new capital in the desert. He called it Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. Today, we know it as Amarna. There, he built great temples open to the sky, without roofs, so the rays of the sun could fall directly upon worshippers. The city rose quickly, built in haste, its streets wide and straight, its walls painted with glowing colors. Life at Amarna was different from life elsewhere in Egypt. Artists began to paint and carve in a new style, one that seemed softer, more intimate. Look closely at the images left behind, and you will see Akhenaten himself, thin and elongated, his body curved, his face with full lips and narrow eyes. He does not look like other pharaohs, stern and muscular. Instead, he is shown with his wife, the famous Nefertiti, and their daughters beneath the warm rays of Aten. These rays, reaching down, ended not in hands of stone but in tiny carved hands of light, holding Ankhs, the symbol of life, as if Aten himself breathed vitality directly into the royal family. Imagine standing there in the blazing desert sun, feeling those rays upon your skin and believing they were not only light but also divine touch. But while Akhenaten praised his god, others whispered. The priests of Ammonius, stripped of power, washed with growing anger. The people, accustomed to many gods protecting many aspects of life, felt abandoned. Who would guard the journey of the dead if Osiris was cast aside? Who would protect mothers in childbirth if Hathor was ignored? Who would guard the fertile fields if the other gods were silenced? And yet, for nearly 2 decades, Akhenaten persisted. He sang hymns to Aten, long, gentle songs that praised the rising sun and the light it gave to birds, to fish, to men, to all creatures. His court followed for a time. His city grew, then flourished. But the world beyond Amarna was not so easily changed. Egypt's borders strained. Foreign allies grew restless. Inside, unrest simmered quietly, hidden beneath the golden surface of his revolution. And then, as quickly as he had risen, Akhenaten faded. His reign ended, and soon after, his city was abandoned. The sands reclaimed its painted walls. Aten, once proclaimed the only god, was pushed aside. The old gods returned with force, their temples restored, their priests once more powerful. It was as though Akhenaten's bold vision had been a dream, a brief flicker in the long night of eternity. Later pharaohs sought to erase his memory entirely. His name was scratched from monuments, his likeness defaced, his city left to crumble. Even his mummies are shrouded in uncertainty, and scholars still debate his health, his motives, his true appearance. Was he a visionary ahead of his time, the world's first monotheist? Or was he a reckless king who weakened his country with strange ideas? For those who lived under his rule, he was both, a sun that shone brightly, yet briefly, before vanishing into the desert horizon. And so, we drift from the farmers in their fields to the pharaoh in his sunlit city, both bound by the same Nile, both waiting for its yearly flood, both part of a cycle greater than themselves. But while some rulers sought to exalt the sun, others, desperate and poor, turned their eyes downward into the hidden tombs of the earth. There, among the silence of the dead, another story waits. Let us descend now from the bright horizon of Akhenaten's city into a darker, quieter place. Beneath the sands, behind sealed stone doors, hidden in winding valleys, the dead of Egypt were laid to rest. Kings, queens, nobles, and even the modestly wealthy were buried with care, with prayers, and with treasures meant to last for eternity. Imagine the Valley of the Kings at night. The cliffs rise sharply, pale in the moonlight. The desert air is still, broken only by the faint cry of a night bird. Within those cliffs, carved chambers stretch deep into the rock, painted with glowing images of gods, of stars, of the journey through the afterlife. Lamps once flickered here, as priests chanted words to guide a soul into the land beyond. But where there is treasure, there is temptation. For all the grand hopes of eternity, many tombs did not remain sealed. In the stillness of night, men crept through the narrow corridors, prying open sarcophagi, stripping gold from mummies, carrying away jewels, amulets, and jars filled with fragrant oils. These were not strangers from afar. Often, they were locals, perhaps even workers who had carved the tombs themselves, or guards entrusted with their protection. Hunger drove some, greed drove others. The state recorded their crimes in dusty papyrus documents that survive even now, where interrogations and punishments were noted with chilling calm. Yet tomb robbing was not always a tale of desperation. Centuries later, when the old kings were long forgotten, their tombs still whispered promises to adventurers and scholars. By the 19th century, the Western world's fascination with Egypt had grown into something fevered, a hunger for relics, for secrets, for the allure of the ancient. Men dug recklessly into the sand, pulling statues and sarcophagi into the light, shipping them across oceans to fill museums. Among these discoveries came stories of curses. You may have heard of them. Whispered warnings that those who disturb the tombs of pharaohs will meet misfortune. The most famous, perhaps, is tied to the tomb of Tutankhamun, uncovered in 1922 by Howard Carter. Tutankhamun, the boy king, barely known in life, became immortal in death when his nearly intact tomb was found, sealed and glittering with treasure. The world gasped at the sight of golden masks, thrones, and delicate jewelry lying untouched for over 3,000 years. Yet, soon after, a string of deaths and illnesses among those connected to the excavation fed the legend of a curse. Newspapers of the time spoke of the pharaoh's vengeance, though in truth, most of those present lived long lives. Still, the story remains because it stirs the imagination, the idea that the silence of eternity resists intrusion. Even without curses, the tombs carry mysteries. Consider the mummies themselves, carefully wrapped, their faces sometimes covered with golden masks. They are not simply bodies, they are time travelers, bridging centuries. When scientists unroll or scan them, they find not just bone and cloth, but stories of illness, of diet, of ritual. Some mummies reveal traces of parasites, others evidence of broken bones or royal disease. Each one whispers of a life lived long ago, often in both splendor and struggle. And then, there are those tombs never found. Egypt is vast, and its sands still hold secrets. Somewhere, beneath layers of earth, more kings, more treasures, more stories lie waiting. Archaeologists continue to search, guided by faint clues, an inscription here, a collapsed wall there. Each new discovery adds a brushstroke to a picture that will never be fully complete. But if tombs are places of silence, of darkness, of mystery, above them life carried on, noisy, fragrant, and filled with ceremony. For while the poor bent under the sun, and the dead lay wrapped in their chambers, the priests and elites dined in bright halls, perfumed and adorned in linen, claiming divine authority over both worlds. Let us rise again from the silent tombs and return to the brightness of life above. Here, among Egypt's priests and elites, the world was one of abundance, ceremony, and fragrance. If the farmer's day was defined by sweat and soil, the priest's day was framed by ritual, linen, and incense. Imagine walking through the gates of a great temple, perhaps at Karnak or Luxor. Towering pylons rise before you, carved with images of gods and kings. The air is heavy with the resinous smoke of frankincense and myrrh. Priests, shaven of hair, clothed in immaculate white linen, move with slow and deliberate steps. Their bodies are purified by ritual baths, their mouths rinsed with natron salt to ensure no impurity passes their lips before prayer. Their authority was immense. To the common villager, gods were distant, mysterious beings, but to the priests, the gods were daily companions. They alone entered the hidden sanctuaries, fed the statues with offerings of bread, beer, and meat, and clothed them in fresh garments. To serve the gods was to serve the very heartbeat of the cosmos. And beyond the temples, in the grand villas of the elite, life was equally refined. Picture a banquet hall lit by flickering oil lamps. The walls are painted with images of lotus flowers and musicians. Low couches line the room, and on them recline men and women dressed in fine linen so thin it shimmers like woven air. Their wigs, heavy with scented oils, glisten in the glow of the lamps. Servants move silently among them, offering golden cups of wine sweetened with honey, platters of roasted duck, baskets of pomegranates and dates. Musicians pluck at harps and strike sistrums, their rhythms gentle, meant to soothe rather than excite. The air is cool, carried by breezes from pools lined with lotus blossoms. To sit here was to live in luxury unimaginable to the farmer outside the gates. The elite wore jewelry of gold and faience, bracelets carved with the likeness of protective gods, amulets shaped like scarabs, meant to preserve their souls forever. Even in leisure, they remained mindful of eternity. Yet with this luxury came power, and power was not just political, but spiritual. Priests and elites often blurred the line between the mortal and the divine. Their feasts were not simply indulgence. They were rituals of abundance, reflections of the plenty the gods were thought to bestow. Their very presence, adorned in linen and perfume, was a statement of cosmic order. Ma'at, the balance of the world, maintained through their roles. And for the ordinary people looking on, it must have seemed like another world. The scent of roasting meat might drift beyond the walls, reaching those whose evening meal was coarse bread and onions. The sound of distant music might carry across the night, soft but unreachable. To the farmer, the scribe, the laborer, the lives of priests and nobles were both enviable and untouchable. And yet, all were bound together. For the elites, too, were dependent on the Nile's flood, on the labor of the common people, on the cycles of the land. No matter how fine their linen, how golden their cups, they too would one day be carried to a tomb, wrapped in cloth, offered prayers, and placed in silence beneath the earth. The contrast is stark. A village farmer sweating in the sun, his hands cracked by the plow, and a priest bathed in perfume, speaking softly in the shade of the temple. Yet both are part of one great story. Egypt, eternal, stretching across centuries, balancing toil with splendor, hunger with feasting, silence with song. And so, from the plowed field to the sunlit capital of Akhenaten, from the secret tombs to the perfumed halls of the elite, the rhythm of ancient Egyptian life reveals itself, steady, unhurried, eternal. And now, as our long wandering through ancient Egypt draws to a close, let your mind rest gently, like the Nile at twilight. We began among the farmers, their lives tethered to the river's gift, bending to the soil in a rhythm as old as time. We rose to follow Akhenaten, a king who reached for the sun itself, daring to reshape the world in light. only for his vision to fade into desert sand. We descended into the tombs, into chambers meant to last forever, filled with silence, treasure, and the whisper of curses that may only live in our imagination. And finally, we entered the halls of priests and nobles, where linen gleamed and incense rose, where feasts echoed softly through the night. So many lives, so many voices, all carried away by the centuries. Yet still, their traces remain. A potsherd in the sand, a hymn carved on stone, a golden mask hidden in darkness until uncovered. Their world is gone, but not lost. As you lie here now, listening, perhaps you feel a quiet connection to them. They too watch the stars above the desert. They too listened to the rustle of wind through reeds. They too wondered what tomorrow would bring. In this way, though time stretches across thousands of years, their lives are not so far from our own. The difference is that tonight, you rest not in a mud brick house or beneath temple ceilings, but in the comfort of your own world, a place with soft beds, steady light, and peace. There are no taxes to be counted in grain, no heavy floods to fear, no tomb robbers whispering in the night. Only stillness, only quiet, only the gentle drift of sleep. So let the Nile fade from your mind. Let the desert winds grow soft. Let the glow of the eternal sun fade into darkness. You have traveled far enough. The story slows now, becoming silence. And in that silence, may you find rest.